Hey everyone, and welcome to the 153rd edition of DF Direct Weekly, which is and shall remain our weekly discussion show covering the latest gaming and technology news and the various associated disasters we seem to have been having of late. We'll try and keep this one as disaster-light as possible, although looking at the first news topic, maybe not. Joining me, first of all, John Linneman, hello.
Hello, I'm glad this is still indeed our weekly show. After all these episodes, I think we're still
153 plus specials.
Plus specials. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
And Alex Battaglia, hello.
Hey there, Rich. I don't have any nice quips to say, but I do have an Aegea physics card, and I think that's better than anything I could say. Just look at that, baby.
I mean, Alex, I also have a sealed copy of Kuri Kuri Mixu for PS2.
Yeah.
So,
but John, do you have a 3rd edition Eldar Craft World Codex?
But Alex, do you have a jailbroken 3DS with Rayman 3D on it?
No, I don't. We should just keep pulling objects out of hats next to us.
While Richard gets increasingly
Alex,
angry.
Have you got? Do you happen to have an original script of the Star Trek Next Generation episode Darmok?
No, I don't. Do you, Rich?
I do actually.
I was waiting for him to pull it out.
That is such a good episode, though. That's a script I would keep.
That's a good
liner notes on there.
All right.
Yes, this is apparently a news show about games, so let's crack on. First news topic this week. So last week it was revealed that Nintendo was commencing legal action against the creators of the Yuzu and Citra emulators, and we kind of expected to sort of sit back and watch this story play out. Legal counsel to be appointed, court dates to be settled upon, but it's all over before it even started, really. The Yuzu and Citra team have put out a statement basically saying that they've ceased all development on the emulator. The emulator is now dead, effectively. And more than that, they've had to settle to the tune of $2.4 million. So, John, is this an outrageous affront on game preservation and emulation, or is it something a bit more nuanced, owing to Nintendo's proclamations about piracy surrounding this emulator?
Indeed, this does seem to be a somewhat complex and nuanced situation. Obviously, it goes without saying we are not lawyers, so any discussion point is just us sharing opinions and thoughts, which will hopefully be moderately correct, but no promises.
We're not even armchair lawyers.
Not even armchair lawyers. That's exactly right. So based on this, it seems to me that the reason this went to settlement is that the user developers wanted to avoid the discovery phase, which would have opened them up to so much more scrutiny from Nintendo. And based on some of the documents I've seen, Nintendo already had a lot. And it seems like they have lots of screenshots of things from within their Discord server that basically shows them effectively engaging in piracy and day one releases and sharing things between the devs and all manner of illegal activities by the letter of the law, right? And I feel like there probably is more there that they did not want Nintendo to go digging into further, and so they settled. In addition, it seems that they had to turn over all of their devices, logs, websites, everything over to Nintendo, which is seemingly how the Citra emulator got caught up in all of this as well. Not that Nintendo specifically went after Citra, but they went after this corporation that was behind all these emulators. And annoyingly, it does also seem like these guys cataloged a ton of information on everybody that joined it as well, from what I've seen. So now Nintendo has a bunch of personal information and such on the people that were part of this community that they effectively had to turn over to them. So it seems like this was... It's not so much that Nintendo was going after emulation per se. They were going after specifically the behavior and the sorts of things that the Yuzu developers were engaging with, which, in a way it's about piracy, I guess. Playing day one games is one thing, but the way they went about doing it and talking about it within their channel seems like that could have been the point that Nintendo could get them on, so to speak, among other things. And that's fundamentally the problem. So by settling, they also helped avoid Nintendo probing further and attacking any sort of real emulation sort of front on this.
Okay.
So that's good at least. But it is a shame that these things were kind of killed off, though I suspect they will continue in some form. And really, this shows that, to me at least, that the Yuzu guys, and also with their Patreon stuff, accepting money and promoting, that they could play the latest releases, they flew too close to the sun, and they probably should have kept their nose clean and tried to, because this was dicey stuff, I think. Trying to
I think,
right?
Well, yes, if you're specifically saying, okay, this new release of our emulator is going to play this game that isn't out yet. That is problematic, right? That is not going to go down particularly well with Nintendo. I'm kind of more sort of curious about the whole idea of emulation here, in that it's holistically, if you've got a good emulator of the Switch, it should just play all these new releases anyway. There shouldn't really be a bespoke need for specific support for individual games, because the system is the system, right? It's a closed platform. It doesn't evolve. Yeah. But I can only imagine that it's not quite as simple as that.
I don't know all the details on this, but I'd imagine it's a matter of high level versus low level emulation, and they are engaging in sort of the high level stuff, which does require more work to sort of intercept what software's doing and translate that to instructions that a computer can understand. If they were doing actual low level emulation or like FPGA style emulation, that wouldn't be necessary if it was perfectly implemented, but I don't think that's the case here. So
they were not low level enough to essentially not require per game hacks at that point, which is the issue. For me here, I'd rather they didn't openly broadcast that they were kind of slightly maybe abetting piracy. Because it just conflates emulation with piracy in the public eye again, which is dumb. But regardless of that, I still actually wish this didn't even happen at all, because regardless, I mean, I highly doubt these individuals who are part of this group have the money to put up for this, and kind of Nintendo's pretty good at ruining people's lives when it comes to putting them in debt for long periods of time after the fact. I mean, just a little bit of software. I don't know. I just don't feel any moral outrage. I'm not a Nintendo fanboy.
Well, there was reports that their Patreon was bringing in $30,000 a month.
Still, I mean, over the years, it's still not multiple millions of dollars to bring up. So I just feel like, it's going a bit too far there. Also, taking down Citra with it too seems like going too far. In general, I don't think emulation is ever a problem, and I think it's actually fine to have a Patreon if you're making an emulator. I think you should be able to make money off of it. 100%. It's just a matter of you shouldn't engage in like helping people pirate games if that is what happened. I mean, right now they didn't set a precedent in courts to question the legality of emulation. I don't know if they'd win that anyway, but what they did do is they made sure that they scare people to not try and do emulation, because out of court, they can just, who knows, whatever you're doing, but they can scare you out of court, or they can make you spend so much money on lawyering as to never engage in making emulators in the first place out of fear. So I don't think this is actually a good outcome in the end, regardless of whatever these people did. So that's just my opinion on it. But I'm also like, literally the only place I would play a lot of games is on an emulator if they're a Nintendo one. They'd be old ones. I don't play new ones, but like honestly, my platform's PC. So for me, it's sad.
I don't think Nintendo cares.
It brings us on to this question from SJ33 in brackets Jake, obligatory hire Jakes, before we crack on with his point here. Gabe Newell famously said that piracy is a service problem. Would you agree that Switch emulation is a great example of that? There's no great mystery why people want to play big games like Tears of the Kingdom on PC. A lot of people want to play these games but want to use their PC rather than a hybrid handheld, like Alex. Exclamation point.
Yeah, he knows.
Many people reduce piracy to just being about people not wanting to pay for games, but I would suggest that a great number of those who use Yuzu to play Tears of the Kingdom would have happily bought a Steam version had one existed. Consoles will always be hacked, as recent PS5 exploits demonstrate, and emulators aren't going away. Yuzu's death just sees the baton passed to Ryujinx and other future emulators. Surely the way to deal with people emulating their games without paying would be to respond to the evident demand by providing these games on PC officially. I guess so. I mean, I guess of all of the platform holders, Nintendo would probably be set to benefit most and would have the least negative impact on their console ecosystem, right? Because it's, they're very much separate and distinct. But it's just not what they want to do. And ultimately, I think you've got to respect the people who create the games about what they want to do with them and how they want to sell them. But absolutely, clearly, there would be a massive market for Nintendo games on PC, no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether Nintendo will ever deviate from their chosen business model, though. What do you think, John?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I want to be clear what I said in the opening there. That's just my read on the situation, not necessarily how I feel about it. And I do kind of agree with you, Alex.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that things played out this way. And I also agree with what Jake's saying about it's not just about not buying the games. It's because they want to experience them correctly. Sorry. Better. The Switch itself does not play these games perfectly as you would like. Which was not always the case with Nintendo games. Usually do run pretty well, but you look at something like Tears of the Kingdom, it's not terrible or anything. It's an impressive game for the hardware, but the PC can do much better. But like you say there, I don't think Nintendo's business strategy will ever really take that into account unless some unforeseen disaster happens. That's just not where they're interested in playing the game right now. And they absolutely could get additional sales by releasing on Steam. But I mean, I don't think that they care per se. And
no, it's not their chosen target for their games. It's just not the Nintendo way, but I absolutely see the point, and clearly there would be a massive market there. And clearly, for Nintendo, the business model is sustainable, right? Because they don't have any plans for multi-platform, unlike PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah, I also agree with the sentiment that old Gabe Newell sentiment that piracy is a service issue. Honestly, I've always felt like the piracy is ruining PC gaming thing that happened in the mid 2000s was not very accurate. But it changed the industry forever. And then, we have stuff like Steam come about in the end, which is, I guess, a net positive. I would have loved to have seen Nintendo do something like that. And they had weird experimentations with stuff like this, with like bringing Super Mario Galaxy out on
Chinese things.
Chinese.
It was on the Shield Android TV.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
totally
but
weird.
Only in China.
In China, I don't know what that was about, but whatever energy they had going back then, it's not.
I think it was
today.
It was just an NVIDIA Contra deal. It was just something. They had a deal with NVIDIA for Switch, and I guess there could have been a proving ground also there for emulation on the Tegra X1.
Right.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Let's take some more supporter questions here. This one from Perfect_Organism was chatting to a friend about the Yuzu Citra situation, and they raised a really good question. Why did Nintendo choose now to strike? It's not like Yuzu has suddenly just started accepting money on Patreon or playing games at acceptable performance levels or any of the other reasons Nintendo has put forward against Yuzu. Feels like odd timing given we're in the final innings of the Switch's life cycle, and I can't quite put my finger on why they've chosen now to do it. Curious to hear your thoughts on this! ! Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting idea, right, as to why they're doing it now. But I guess the Tears of the Kingdom thing that, was just critical mass. They probably had access to telemetry at that point, or at least a good idea of the how the pirated version was propagating. They've probably got a good idea of the volume of hacked Switch consoles out there. And I think in their legal filings, they were talking about, was it up to 1 million copies were pirated? Also, I think it basically sets a precedent now because, if you look at Switch 2, if it's based on an NVIDIA chipset, it's eminently emulatable on PC, and I suspect they would probably want to nip that in the bud before it even happens. So that would be my reasons. Anything you can think of there, John?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, where they obviously do not want emulation for their Switch 2, but hopefully it's still possible. But yeah, I think that's, I'd imagine that Nintendo has been sort of lying in wait and trying to basically build a strong enough case to actually come after them, and those things take time.
Yeah.
And man, it's hard. I don't know all the details about what's going on, what really happened. I can hardly tell if Nintendo was in the right or the wrong or what's going on here. It just feels so muddled, but I'd imagine that they've been building this case for a while. They decided to strike. They obviously do not want piracy on the Switch 2. And I assume they're going to take additional measures to prevent that, though I suspect it will not last for that long.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a particularly poor security track record, Nintendo.
They sure do. They sure do.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I don't expect that to change with the next console either. And that's good, I think, because fundamentally, I kind of wish that I understand why people want to play new releases on day one on these emulators, but I feel that specific behavior is what ultimately is going to hurt this scene in terms of being able to preserve games long term. At least talking openly and brazenly about it, right? Because that's what Nintendo was after. And now that we lost things like Citra, or at least active development on Citra, that's concerning, because Nintendo has a terrible track record for maintaining their platforms long term, especially on the digital side. Right? Like, they just turn the stores off. They just remove games for sale forever. Yeah. You just lose so much. And we need this stuff. We need piracy for these games to exist into the future. Yeah. And so that really, that annoys me a lot.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question here from Gatti. What's the only foolproof way for Nintendo system emulation to exist without any legal challenges? I feel depressed with the Yuzu news. Well, there's no foolproof way for it to exist without legal challenges, because you can make a legal challenge about anything. Whether the case has merit or not is entirely different.
Yeah.
But I do think the concept of emulating a current generation system, in its prime, is probably the tipping point for that.
It's funny. This has happened before. I remember the first time this occurred was with Ultra HLE on the PC. Which
N64
dropped in the middle of N64's life, and was playing stuff like Zelda Ocarina of Time on your PC on a 3DFX card.
That was high res.
I certainly engaged in that.
Yeah, of course. First time I ever played Pokemon was on an emulator, to be honest with you. And that was on a Windows 98 PC. Yeah, I feel like it happening now is like what John said, but I also feel like given the fact that it is the tail end of the Switch's lifespan, that people are probably who would maybe even, just semi-realistically, I imagine people who own Switches were not happy with the performance of TOTK, Tears of the Kingdom. However you say it, TOK, Tears of the Kingdom. And I would imagine a ton of people were like, oh, I'd rather play this at 60 on a PC because I'm not interested in the handheld experience or something.
Well, there is another point here, which is that we've reached a point now where emulation is good enough for Tears of the Kingdom to run exceptionally well on a Steam Deck, which
that's cool.
One might argue is a challenge to Nintendo's portable aspirations there.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Well, it's not cool for Nintendo, right?
Oh, yeah.
And presumably not cool for Yuzu at this point in time. What else we got here? This one from Miss Pia Crappenshits. After what Nintendo has done to emulation, is it now more unethical to buy Nintendo games than to pirate them? Well, no. Obviously.
I don't know about that.
No Nintendo, no games. Right? It's that simple. Yeah, I think in this case there was clearly an argument to be made about piracy and how it was relating to Yuzu, and the fact that seemingly they were getting hold of games before they were released. and then being able to provide support for them on launch day, which seems to have been the key point of contention. Now, there are potential explanatory factors there. Games can be released early, for example.
Right.
Retailers can get hold of them early. Mail-outs sometimes happen early. A whole host of reasons how they could have got those games early. But the point is that, the consistency of it was quite alarming. And it also points out, of course, that the piracy problem hasn't gone away.
Nope.
Because people are still going to be pirating on their hacked Switch consoles. And I think Nintendo really needs to get a grip on what's happening with access to these games, how it's happening early. There's been a crackdown on journalists getting review code early.
Oh yeah,
which has done nothing.
Exactly, because that's not where the leaks were coming from.
That was not the vector.
They've just made it much more difficult to get review stuff on your Switch and super limit who can play it, but it changed nothing. So obviously the leak is coming from elsewhere.
Yeah. I haven't got too much more to say on this. It's deeply upsetting, obviously, that this strike has happened against emulation, but at the same time, I do think this one is slightly different in that it is a current generation system. It was specifically targeting support for games on day of release. And who knows what was happening on the Discord, because I don't.
I mean, it's hard to even go through all this. I mean, maybe it's what was legal, what wasn't legal, who can say? But I feel like the only surefire way to really make this work, maybe even, is that I feel like the actual developers of Yuzu needed to take more of a clean room approach, where they are separated from this community. They are not interacting with the community. Maybe there could be a go-between. I mean, I don't know how it would work, but they seem to be a little bit too relaxed about this whole thing in a way that kind of opened themselves up to this attack by Nintendo.
I think to conclude, one thing I do want to point out is that none of this has been tested in court. So all of the allegations that Nintendo has within its docket are exactly that, allegations. And, they weren't proven in court because there was no court case. And for whatever reason, the Yuzu guys decided to settle and just end the matter. So, the full story we might never learn. But, I think the one thing is that we don't have any counter arguments from the Yuzu team, except for the statement saying we don't support piracy and we're shutting down. And that's it. Did you have something to say about 3DS?
Yeah,
or Virtual Boy.
I thought this was kind of tangentially related. Is that, again, this is an example of Nintendo hardware and doing things that beyond what Nintendo intended. That's really cool. The Virtual Boy, it was a failed machine, but I think a lot of people wanted to see it on the 3DS as available as purchases. Not that we automatically deserve it, that gets into the whole thing, but it would have been a cool feature to offer. Now it's available, and I actually tested it. It is called Red Viper, and it is actually an emulator for the Nintendo 3DS that plays the entire Virtual Boy library in 3D. You do need a hacked 3DS, which is a trivial process, and I recommend doing it, by the way, especially if it unlocks region-free games, which that system was region-locked annoyingly. It allows a lot of other features as well, and this is one of them. And it's super cool. It's super cool playing these games on the 3DS. They look amazing on there. Just that the 3D effect is exactly as I had envisioned. It's deep, it's rich, and it's cool being able to revisit that library on a 3DS while you maintain the 3D effect, but you're not shoving your face into the Virtual Boy itself, which is the most comfortable thing in the world. And part of that, I wonder, one of the things about it I noticed right away, and I noticed this, there's also an Oculus Quest version of an emulator, similar emulator that plays Virtual Boy, which is also cool. But both that and the 3DS exhibit judder in motion, which prompted me to look into what the actual Virtual Boy runs at. And it turns out it's a 50 hertz system. So
wow.
It updates at 50 frames per second, which means you don't actually get perfect fluidity on either of these platforms, like the 3DS or the Oculus, because they don't go that low on the refresh rate.
Crazy.
And I don't, there's really no solution to that per se, but that made me wonder if that's why people complained about headaches from the 3DS, because 50 hertz is definitely more flickery than 60, especially with the way they draw the screen. I suspect it was just a little bit too much for people. And, especially when you're looking through like a dark visor like thing. So
is it like alternate frame? So actually running at 25?
no, I don't think it's alternate frames. I think it's like a line by line. It's like it draws like a thin line and does there's some kind of like physical mirror trick, or I genuinely do not remember how the Virtual Boy functions, but it's a really weird, interesting technology.
Okay.
But it's now preserved on the 3DS, and it actually allows you to use
That's awesome.
the 3D effect on the 3DS, which I like.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. You'd think it was something that Nintendo would have thought about doing for 3DS, but then at the same time, the Virtual Boy is, I don't know, is it like a sort of shameful episode in their history they'd rather not revisit?
I feel
Some
like
of the games are all right, weren't they?
yeah, the games are fine. Like the Wario Land game especially is amazing. Jack Brothers is genuinely great. Like there's good stuff on there, and I feel like it's kitschy enough that Nintendo could stand to revisit it, and it would certainly not tarnish anything about their image, at least not more than suing emulator developers would. I'm surprised they never gave it a shot, and it's obviously, I think it's too late now because they don't have a 3D based system any longer, which is where they make the most sense. And the 3D effect for like 95 or whenever that was is shockingly good in these games. Like it really looks, there's a lot of depth. The Wario Land game in particular, I love because it's got, multi-tiered. You got stuff in the background and the foreground, and even the objects in the foreground have various levels of depth to it to give it like a real 3D look. But it's basically like 32-bit style sprite quality. Like it looks like a PS1 or a Saturn game in terms of like the level of detail in the sprites and the pixel art. It's just that it's all red and black. But it's actually like super detailed. It's also widescreen. The view, I guess, was wider, actually. And when you look at it on the 3DS screen, it perfectly fills the 3DS screen, and it aligns to the pixel grid, and it's in 3D. So it genuinely feels like these games were natively made for the 3DS, which is absolutely wild. But beyond that, though, I started fiddling. A friend of mine was like showing footage of Rayman 3D, which is a launch title. And I've had Homebrew on my 3DS for a while. And I was like, wait a minute. So I popped that in as well just to test. And sure enough, so when Rayman 2 launched on the 3DS, it ran very badly, like 20 to 30 FPS. It was not a good port. And I kind of largely ignored it. But now, because on the new Nintendo 3DS, you can force the overclock in all modes. Again, nothing new, but you're basically raising it from like 268 megahertz up to like 800 something megahertz. So it's a gigantic leap. And games like that and others now run at a completely locked 60 FPS without breaking a sweat. Nice. It doesn't work with every game. Ridge Racer 3D crashes if you have it on, but you can bring up the menu in game at any point by pressing like left shoulder button, down D-pad, and like select or start or something, and it brings up a menu on the bottom screen, lets you adjust all this stuff. But there's like an L2 cache setting and a clock speed setting you can adjust.
Cool.
So yeah, 3DS, man, it's back. It's still good, and it's better than when Nintendo officially ran it. You can do a lot of stuff on a hacked 3DS now. Cool. I recommend it.
So looking at the docket, I think that's our last disaster / debacle that we've discussed. Got lined up to discuss this week. So I guess we can crack on to happier times, hopefully.
Let's hope so.
Okay, next news story of the week. It's a double whammy from Nixxes. We have the specifications, the recommended technical specifications for the PC port of Horizon Forbidden West, which we'll discuss momentarily. But then literally the day or so after that, it was revealed that Nixxes are also handling the port of Ghost of Tsushima with a release date scheduled for May the 16th. Let's talk about Horizon first because, well, obviously this is like a fully Dutch enterprise here, based in the Netherlands, yeah. Same with Nixxes. And if we look back at Horizon Zero Dawn, that was not the greatest of launches, right, Alex? But Nixxes seem to have done most of the optimization work on there, right? So presumably they're pretty well positioned to handle the Forbidden West port.
Yes.
And the recommended specs look entirely reasonable.
Yeah, they do. That was my first reaction. So to go back in time, Horizon Zero Dawn, the original, when it released, it was hard to even get on like original settings, 1080p 30 on a GTX 1060, a GPU which is probably about usually 2x what you'd expect in PS4 performance. The port was very poor in terms of how much GPU grunt it required versus other ports of games. And that's been an issue in general, actually, with the Sony PC porting process, is that they get the games running, I would say. CPU-wise, it can be good or bad, depending upon the game. But stuff like The Last of Us Part 1, which Rich has talked about a number of times, it still has very relatively poor GPU performance. That is really inexplicable. And I think not good.
Sorry, to be fair, Alex, you've talked about it a lot as well.
I've talked about it a lot as well too, because I still find it it's a sore spot. Offensive. It's offensive. Well, I just think it's just so sad because like come on, Naughty Dog should be better than that. But either way, if Naughty Dog was responsible for that aspect of the porting, either way, this one though produces, based upon the recommended specs and the minimum specs, it seems to be a different situation altogether. For example, the Horizon Forbidden West PC high specs are 1440p 60 at the high graphical preset. Now, just as a reminder, Nixxes in Spider-Man games, for example, or in Ratchet and Clank, the high preset is typically the performance mode preset from the PS5 version of the game. Okay. This is 60 FPS. Obviously, our review is going to have to bear out if that's true. This is 1440p 60 FPS on an RTX 3070 or RX 6800. The reason why this is good is because technically the PlayStation 5 version here, if it is similar to the high graphical preset as found on PC, it would be lower res actually than an RTX 3070. And that would mean that an RTX 3070 is running the game better than a PlayStation 5 version, which is good because that's expected behavior across a wide variety of PC ports. In the past, with something like The Last of Us Part 1, that is not the case. So that made me happy, and it made me think that, hey, 8 gigabyte GPUs, also GPUs that are getting older now that are going down from the upper mid-range bracket, maybe into the mid-range or low range, depending upon what generation we're looking at, they're going to run the game really, really well based upon these specs here. You also have RTX 3060, 1080p 60 at the medium settings. That's actually great. That's a pretty good 1080p GPU, I would say. And the game's going to look good. I'm excited for this. At the end of the day, though, I'm still a little bit worried, as always, because Ratchet and Clank came out with issues that I feel like shouldn't have been there at launch, and also had frame time stability issues that shouldn't have been there. And I'm a little worried we might see the same thing here, but it all really depends on how much I think they've kind of changed from the original porting version that was done by Virtuous. Who was it done by?
Zero Dawn. I'm assuming this was done from the ground up by Nixxes.
I really hope this was done from the ground up, and there is almost zero relation to that initial DX12 port of the engine. I really hope it was like a fresh start, because that was not a good base probably to start with. And that's, these things will all bear out during the review process or afterward. But I'm just hoping it's a good thing. To switch gears though,
of war,
we've got now Ghost of Tsushima coming out in May. This is another Nixxes port in a completely different engine, an engine to which, to my knowledge, has never been on PC. So I'm very curious to see what they do there, how it performs. It was a pretty great performer, though, already on PS4 Pro and PS5, right? Like, it's a game that runs really well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And, it's not like pushing super high-end technology. And I think that bared out in the review back then, where John had like some really positive aspects of the game and some other aspects where he was like, it's okay. And I think this will probably be like one of their best running games as a result, since it has most of its technology from a PS4 version. So I would imagine that. The one thing that always does sadden me a little bit, though, once again, sorry, I have to nitpick, is that it is, they announce features, and it's like DLSS, DLAA, FSR, etc. Well, widescreen, all very nice things, but after so long, what about some ray trace shadows? Something like that, Ooh. I just feel like, because, like just having a game be re-released and running better and being feature complete, it's nice, but it's nothing that really sparks my like super interest in the game from a technical visual perspective, at least. Like high-res shadows are not so interesting to me. But we'll see. Once again, that's something that's going to come out, and we'll cover it, and maybe hopefully get some insight from Nixxes about what that porting process was like.
That would be very interesting. I mean, going back to Forbidden West, kind of curious to see if the minimum specifications still apply to the Burning Shores DLC, which had a higher requirement. There was no PS4 version of that, so curious about that. Also interested in scalability, how they've actually made it scalable, because there's some like crazy levels of density in Forbidden West, and then there's the Nubis cloud system, which is crazy stuff. So curious about this.
I imagine, like most things, though, it'll just be resolutions, internal resolutions. Like Nubis runs at an internal resolution that's lower than 4K, for example. So they can maybe make it lower, make it rely on more previous frames. In regards to the other stuff, I think they have the PS4 version as like the low quality setting already to fall back to. And then they can just dial that. Because, like John showed off in his video back then, there's like entirely missing like layers of geometry in the world on the PS4 version. I'm hoping that the game's low version and or very low settings are similar to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they're hitting the 1650 as the recommended GPU for the very low preset, which I think is possibly 1060 area or slightly faster. Can't quite recall there. 550 XT, 5500 XT for the Radeon parts, 4 gig GPUs. Very curious to see how that's going to shape up in terms of the texture quality there.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
Yeah. The thing is, we don't really know what medium, high, or very high. I noticed there's a very low, but not on low setting.
Yeah, they don't mention that. That's interesting.
Yeah, whether there is a low. I'm sure there must be a low. I'm curious what that's going to take the form of. And also, whether we can actually expect any scalability beyond the PlayStation 5 version, which is already pretty dense. So,
I almost imagine
interesting.
No. As sad as that is, like they like the additional like level of detail and or resolution that they usually offer above beyond ray tracing stuff from like Ratchet and Clank has usually been extremely minor in terms of like how it affects the overall image, which is a bit sad because I remember definitely in like Horizon Zero Dawn when that came out, like they offered settings for like LOD, but they were so minor that it was practically invisible. Let's hope that it's a bit different than that. Because PCs like CPUs these days are like ridiculously fast in comparison to the stuff on the consoles. So it'd be nice to see that used for something more than just more frames.
Yeah, we've got an SSD requirement, which I guess is to be expected. And this time, no sort of fantasy requirement for 32 gigs of system memory.
Yeah.
16 gigs all
don't know what that was about. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm really looking forward to this. Hopefully we'll get to see the game really soon and hopefully have a bit of a chat with Nixxes about the porting process because, to be fair, when you look at Death Stranding, obviously Decima can run really well on PC. It just requires really good developers at the forefront. I guess they did whip Zero Dawn into shape. I mean, it's no longer anything like the disaster that we saw at launch.
Don't forget, like that launch.
Hopes are high.
Yeah, the launch version of Horizon Zero Dawn was so bad. Don't forget, that's a game where you would just sit the camera still and it would just start dropping frames for no good reason, like on high-end kit.
Well, it also had that gigantic PCIe throughput issue. You remember that?
Yeah. Where I found out a very funny thing. Yeah, that was great. Actually, I haven't gone back since then to see if that's been alleviated at all. It probably isn't. I imagine, because that might require a lot more work. But at
Right.
least the shader stutter is gone, and yeah, that's good.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's coming soon, so hopefully we'll be hands-on with that very soon. And yeah, I mean, we're really looking forward to that. I guess we can move on to the next news topic. Okay, so this week we had a new showcase from Microsoft, the Xbox Partner Preview, basically an exploration of the new third-party titles that we could expect soon. And we had a surprise drop of the Stalker trilogy, which kind of came out of nowhere. We had no idea that was happening. That isn't specific to Xbox, I understand. I think it's multi-plat, but there we are. It was a part of it. John, fair few games in here. We haven't got time to discuss them all, but what caught your eye?
Okay, so the first one is a bit of an unknown quantity. It's called Unknown 9 Awakening. And
Right.
this is being published by Namco. And I'm just going to call him Namco. I'm sorry. That's how I roll. This seems to be some sort of a weird... Okay, it kind of reminded me of Geist for the GameCube, but maybe taken to a new level, where it seems like you're able to possess people in the world and then cause them to perform actions and then possess another one. So it's like they show an example of this chain reaction where like you possess one guy, you run over, take a hatchet to another guy, and then you go you take another guy from there and shoot like an explosive thing. And then when you go back to your body, it sort of unpauses that world and everything that you just did happens. So like the thing explodes, you hit the one guy with a hatchet. Like it's almost seems puzzle driven, where you're trying to go into these scenarios, figure out the best way to take everyone out, quietly, so to speak. Like it looks like a stealth game where you sneak into areas and then you're possessing people and then triggering these actions. So it's like a stealth puzzle game, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say exactly from the trailer, but I thought it looked really cool, really interesting. So I'm very curious to see that. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's probably Unreal Engine.
That sounds reasonable.
Just looking at the visuals, like I feel like I see a lot of Unreal isms, but hey, whatever, that's fine. It looks nice, so I'm interested in that. There was also The Alters, which is as Alex confirmed, it is basically combining Moon with what's it called?
Pitch Black.
Pitch Black. The Vin Diesel classic Pitch Black, where you're stuck on this planet. The sunset or the sunrise is deadly, like daylight it's too hot for you to survive. And you're in this large wheel-shaped ship with multiple rooms. It seems to roll across the planet. But the caveat here is that you can't manage all the systems and actually survive by yourself. And it seems like there's some sort of discovery made here where you can kind of like, I guess, clone yourself. Again, similar to Moon. And you use all these different clones, which seem to have different personalities depending on how they're sort of used, raised, whatever. And you use all of them to run the ship. Mm-hmm. So the concept seems kind of cool for a game, depending on how it's executed, but it seems to combine sort of going out onto this mysterious planet, doing exploration, resource gathering, while then also going back and managing the ship and essentially not succumbing to the sunlight. So yeah, I'm curious how that'll play. I thought that looked good. Obviously they did show there was the Sinking City 2, which was just kind of like a very simple cinematic looking trailer. There was the Final Fantasy 14 stuff. We know that is coming to Xbox, and that's interesting because that when it's currently in beta, but I think the Xbox version is the same essentially as what's currently available. But sometime in the summer, I think they are doing like a massive overhaul to the visuals, like introducing a lot of new technologies to improve the game's visuals. So I assume Xbox then will also get that. So
so we've got Marc Triforce Duddleson, the big Final Fantasy 14 king.
Yep.
He's going to be taking a look at the Xbox version for us, and I guess in the summer he's going to be taking a look at it again.
Exactly. So we'll have some updates on that. Obviously, then cool. After that, there was the Stalker video. I think this was the biggest, just like genuine surprise in terms of like what they brought this to consoles. This is,
we did it.
What can I say? This is as PC a game as it gets. This is like PC in game form, like distilled down into just this one thing, right? This is not a game you expect to see in a console, despite the fact that Stalker 2 is coming to consoles and all that. But there's a lot of things about the way the systems work that kind of surprise me. And first of all, the original game's from 2007, I guess. Same year as Crysis. It never looked as good as Crysis, but I think it's still a handsome game. And based on the footage here, seeing it again, it continues to look good. So, it shows its age, but it doesn't look like, say, a PS360 game per se.
No, it doesn't look
it's beyond that.
It doesn't look like Turning Point Fall of Liberty or whatever.
It does not look like Turning Point Fall of Liberty or Legendary.
Or Legendary.
That was a deep dive there, Alex.
Yeah.
Those were really crap games.
The Spark Unlimited games, baby.
Yeah.
I'm actually very curious to see what they've done here. I assume they've had to build, well, you can see it in the UI. It looks like they built a whole new interface to support console play, which conversely, I assume this is coming to PC. I actually don't know. Is it? Was it announced?
Does it require it? Does it? We haven't really looked at this yet, whether there's any kind of modernization at all. It does say refined for consoles.
Yeah, I think it's UI stuff though. Graphically, it looks like a lot of the stuff we saw back then.
I would like to see a new refreshed PC version designed to run on modern Windows without issues and support the gamepad. Is all I'm saying.
That'd be nice.
I think that would be cool.
Everyone would like that.
The thing is, though, is I never really got on with Stalker back in the day because I found the AI intolerable to play against. Like, just it's a game that sort of didn't allow me to play it the way I wanted to play it, which was more like a stealth game. And the way the AI behaves, it was overreactive. It reminded me of the I'm going to shoot you in the face guys from Far Cry 1, where it's like, there's no gray area. When they see you, like, everybody knows where you're at, and everything just pops off, and it turns into a shooter. And the shooting I never found enjoyable. But I know this game has its fans. It's beloved. And I feel like I owe it to give it another shot. So I kind of want to give it another try. Although if there's a PC version, that would be more convincing.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, if you have a PC, you should probably look at some of the modernization mods.
That's true. There's some good
mods.
There's
so many. Like, I can't even count them all. And some of them make the game much more intense, even more than John is describing right now. Some radically change the AI in the game. There's huge graphical update mods. There's a lot of stuff. So I think if you have a PC, you're probably better off with that. But if you've never played Stalker and you're excited for Stalker 2, give it a try. It seems like it's pretty cheap actually on the PS4 version. For all three games, there are varying levels of quality. I would say a lot of people really like the first game and the third game, less so the second one. And you'll have to, I think you just gotta, it's a game of its time, but if you play it and you like games that want to at least get you involved in some sort of atmospheric adventure, that is pretty free form in a lot of the ways you can move around the world and interact with it, then you'll probably like this. If you do enjoy something like Far Cry 2, for example, you might like this game.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's how I'd recommend it to people.
Also, people in the comments, if you're watching this, if you guys have any suggestions on mods to specifically help with things like AI that you would suggest I give a try, let me know. I would love to find out because I really want to enjoy this Stalker someday.
Just one thing, Alex, just have a bit more faith in your counting abilities. I think if all of the mods were laid out before you, you probably could count them.
This is true. I probably could. If they were laid out before me in a grid, I could count them. Very good point, Rich.
Sorry, John, I interrupted you there with that completely useless
That's a good point.
insert there.
Oh, no problem at all.
Have a bit of faith. Have faith of the heart, right?
In your counting abilities.
Okay, so following Stalker, they actually showed a game that I'm cautiously interested in. I don't know anything about the developer, but it's called Monster Jam Showdown. And it looks fun as heck, right? Like, some of the racing actually reminded me a little bit of MotorStorm. But then also the fact that this was shown at a Microsoft show got me thinking about the old days of Monster Truck Madness, which is a series I do actually like a lot. This looks quite a bit different than that, though.
Is the Gravedigger in Monster Truck Madness, John?
I think so. Gravedigger. I'm pretty sure Gravedigger's in there. I would be surprised if he wasn't.
Is that a vehicle?
It's a famous vehicle. It's the only monster truck I know.
He is in this new one, Monster Jam Showdown. It looks cool. I love arcade style racing games, so like anybody that's giving it a try, like that makes me excited, and I will play Monster Jam Showdown and find out how it goes.
Does it actually dig graves?
I have no idea, Rich.
Or just being a bit literal. It would be a weird thing to have in a racing game.
I guess it implies that Gravedigger is so powerful that it buries all the foes in the race. It buries everyone.
Yes, yeah, I'm just being annoying.
The thing about Gravedigger is I went to a monster truck rally once, and I felt Gravedigger was there, and I felt like they just kind of handed him the win unfairly. Like every time they'd just be like, "Oh, Gravedigger!" It's like the whole thing felt rigged.
Gravedigger,
and I was like, "No, come on now, like really, guys." But that monster truck rallies are interesting because like there was a section where they would like have a t-shirt cannon, they would shoot out into the audience t-shirts, but they would have people like yell things for it to, like everybody on the left yell. They would use corporate slogans. It'd be like, everybody on the left yell Wendy's, and you'd hear the whole crowd go Wendy's,
this is awful
and stuff like this.
John.
And then they would fire t-shirt cannons with monster truck t-shirts out into the
killed
audience.
By a t-shirt gun like mod from The Simpsons.
It was incredible.
Okay.
Oh my god.
If ever we do live events, we need a t-shirt cannon. There's the DF t-shirt.
Fully automatic t-shirt cannon to hose the crowd with.
Exactly.
Anything else in the partner preview?
Sure. Do you like Berserkers?
What
do you think about Berserkers? What if you want to see the first Berserker? Because there exists such a game, and they showed it, and it seems to be. I would describe it as a reasonably attractive Souls-like.
The Viking game, then I presume, but based upon the name. I don't know.
It doesn't look particularly Viking, although the frame rate in the trailer is really bad, so I don't know what's going on. Souls is often used as like shorthand to describe this type of game, but it's sort of a more delicate action game. It's the type where you've got to dodge, parry, you have to time your attacks, and enemies deal extreme damage. I find these very rewarding, and I do like these types of games, and this one does look nice, so I am willing to give that a shot. It looks like it's coming from Nexon and Neo Dai. I don't know.
That's a studio I don't know.
You know what? Looking at a lot of the games in this, a lot of the stuff is developers that I'm not super familiar with necessarily, and that's awesome because this almost feels like maybe it'll be A tier, but there's a lot of potentially B tier stuff in here, and this is the kind of game that I've lamented disappearing somewhat. So I'm actually happy to see Xbox shining a light on this stuff. Like the first Berserker, that looks pretty good. The freaking Monster Jam Showdown, like that, the fact that that's in an official Xbox presentation, that I think that's awesome. I'm glad to see that. They also showed a Persona 3 Reload expansion pass, by the way. Persona's big, but that's coming. That's cool. They showed something called Tales of Kenzera, which is like a 2D platforming game, which also looks pretty good. Although I keep getting confused when I see that name and think it's another entry in the Tales franchise.
Right.
But it seems to not be that. It is an unrelated game. They showed something called Frostpunk 2, which I don't know anything about it, but it looks very Alex. It's like
Frostpunk.
I
remember the first.
There seems to be building and mouse clicking and overhead views and things like that happening.
Okay.
So and there's like
it requires planning
map.
And thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yes. I like that kind of stuff.
I like the idea of Alex as an adjective as well as a noun.
I like to use Alex as an adjective and a noun.
Well,
and even a verb sometimes.
Well, recently our experience, John, we realized that we can graw, right? Graw is also a verb,
we recently grawed.
It's grawing good.
After I grawed, I grawed the video into a format and then grawed it up to you.
Did you rog?
The thing is,
as well.
we did not rog. We only grawed, and the fact is, it's like we can now speak using graw as a verb, and I think Alex and I we actually understand what's being said.
I get what's going on.
So we've developed like a new language almost.
If
I say I'm grawing the video, and then when it's done, I'm going to graw the video to you. You know what that means,
I
right?
knew exactly what John.
You knew exactly what that meant.
But
anyway, there was one more game shown, which was Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess from Capcom, which looks
They showed this off before, didn't they?
It looks like an even crazier. They did. It's like an even crazier take on Genji Days of the Blade for PS3.
No giant enemy crabs here, though.
There actually might be.
Oh gosh,
I don't know.
Massive damage.
This does look like a game where there's a giant enemy crab and potentially massive damage can be dealt via the weapons they assign to you.
If you hit its weak points,
it's gonna be MT framework for sure, zero doubt, and it looks nice.
MT framework game? What did you just say?
Why do I always say that? I mean,
that'd be amazing.
Reach
They're
for
breaking
the moon.
it back.
It's the Reach for the Moon engine. Although
that'd be sick.
Which it's basically MT framework 3.
Better.
I don't know, but I don't know what to make of this, but it seems to be an action game with a fixed camera angle, even, which looks pretty cool. And
that's rare.
You're rescuing people, and it's much more like it's got a sort of an ancient Japan vibe going on. You rescue villagers, give them roles, but then you're also going around with your sword and just like kicking butt. There seems to be some sort of like strategy element to it where you're like building your town out, your village or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know yet, but I got to say the aesthetic is awesome. It's Capcom. I'm super interested in checking it out. Oh, it's got a day-night cycle thing. I see. That's how it works. Right.
So the interesting thing about these Reach for the Moon engines is based on their presentations. Dragon's Dogma is going to be the first version of their new version of Reach for the Moon. Dragon's Dogma 2, and they said each version, I think, of their games that are coming out after Dragon's Dogma 2 is gonna have RTGI and RT reflections at least.
Can you refer to Dragon's Dogma 2 using plural, like plural possessive?
Dragon's Dogmas.
Wait, Dragon's Dogmas. Wait, Dragon's Dogma 2's.
I kept trying to say it. I couldn't say it.
Right, Dragon's Dogma 2's graphics are good.
It's awful.
The unlock frame rate not so good.
Oh god, that could be a new story in its own right. At this point.
That's what we're talking about next. Anything final on the partner showcase?
Just to reiterate what I just said, I think it's awesome that Xbox put out a show that's filled with these like. I say lesser, but I don't mean actually lesser. I just mean it's not just like full of the quote unquote AAA bangers. It's games that not everyone's heard of. It's smaller scale games.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Games with varied genres and just it's from all sorts of different developers. And I'm super happy and excited that they put this in there. And it's just I appreciate that they're creating shows like this and allow these games to get like sort of a front and center sort of presentation for everyone else.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Good on Xbox for this.
A lot of discussion about the death of the AAA, the unsustainable nature of AAA development. And here we had a bunch of games, the vast majority of which were not AAA, but still look really intriguing. I think the thing to bear in mind, though, is that a lot of these games, you don't really get a true measure of their worth until you actually go hands-on. So, this particular sort of format, trailer after trailer, may not be the best showcase for them, but even so, the fact that you're getting to see these games, getting exposure for these games, I think is excellent.
Actually, on that same point, something we didn't put on the docket, but I did want to quickly mention was that there was the showcase for No Rest for the Wicked from Moon Studios just last week.
Yeah, there was some sort of there was a whole bunch of creators had access to it, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to compliment them on that presentation. I don't know if you guys watched it, but what they did was they came out, they introduced themselves in the studios, they introduced their past games, and then they spent essentially 20 minutes walking players through the various features and types of things they were going for. It's showing different scenarios and very carefully explaining, this is what we're trying to do with this game. This is the type of thing we want to accomplish. This is what you can expect here. This is how this mechanic works. It reminded me totally different game, but it reminded me of that original showcase of something like BioShock back in like 2006, where it was just Ken Levine on a microphone, like talking people through what they wanted to do with the game. And I actually think this type of demo is very, very effective. It communicates what the game is. It gives you a nice look at the visuals, the design, what they're doing. And it kind of just, it feels like it's like taking you on a journey and showing you why you might want to play it. So this is definitely a game I want to cover when it goes early access. Hopefully I can do something like I did for Ori and do like a behind the scenes thing as well. Cause
that'd be great.
I think they're still using their custom version of Unity for it. And it looks stunning.
Amazing.
So
Okay, I think that's all we've got to say about Xbox Partner Showcase, though. A lot to digest there for sure. Let's move on, though. So this week there was an embargo. It looks like it anyway. A preview embargo for Dragon's Dogma 2, and a bunch of people had access to the game, took capture, and the general response seems to have been quite positive. And I think it is, regardless of what we're about to discuss, still one of the most eagerly awaited games of the year, and it does look terrific. I think it was IGN that actually did some frame rate analysis of it, which did confirm that it is running unlocked, that there is basically a performance target in the region of 30 frames per second, but there are not going to be any graphics modes for it. Before we crack on with that particular discussion, John, what did you think of the actual game?
Oh, I mean, I wasn't part of the preview, but I have played
based
it.
on the assets.
Based on the assets and having played an hour of it at TGS, I mean, it looks awesome. I mean, I like Dragon's Dogma, and this seems to be a successful follow-up to that with a lot of big improvements on the way. It still has... They still know how to do them big old monsters that you can run around on, and just like creating this epic feel of going across the world. Everything about it's looking excellent so far. I think I've said it before, but I still love how they handle nighttime in this series, where when the sun sets, it's dark, like completely pitch black dark. When you're in the forest, you basically can see nothing. You have to create your own lights. And it's amazing how transformative that is. Like this, because time of day usually is just like, now here the sky's blue, now it's orange, now it's like a darker shade of blue, and your like navigation and the way you tackle the world does not change at all. You're fundamentally doing the same stuff, right? Here it's like it gets so dark that you actually run the risk of like falling off cliffs and like getting stuck, not being able to find your way, and it changes how you play the game because you need to take night into consideration, and I think that's super cool. So I am looking forward to spending more time with it. And I'm excited that the game itself seems to have turned out really excellent. But then there's the frame rate stuff. I talked about this as well when I played it at TGS, and I brought this up to Capcom at the time. Not that I thought that they would necessarily heed my warnings on this or anything, but I felt that they should provide an optional frame rate cap to 30 frames per second for the consoles, because currently they allow the game to run completely uncapped. The problem is that it does dip below 30, which isn't great, but it also mostly hovers right around 30. So you get that 30 to 35 FPS zone. That's not good looking. That does not look good on most TVs. When you're just V-synced and running around, it's just like this kind of juddery mess that makes the game look less fluid than it should. If you have a VRR capable TV, this can be solved on Xbox without the developer doing anything else, because it will do 120 hertz output with VRR, and the VRR has like it's a system level low frame rate compensation. So it will actually handle this, and it'll look totally fine on Xbox, similar to how Elden Ring's quality mode worked, I would say. But PS5 owners, unless Capcom will need to have implemented an actual 120 hertz output VRR mode into this game, which they've done before, by the way, so there is a chance. But without that, though, you're stuck. The default VRR
when
can't handle it.
DMC 5.
Devil May Cry 5 got a patch.
Right. Oh, okay.
For that. So
yeah, but that was targeting high frame rate, though. It wasn't a low frame rate compensation idea, was it? Right?
It was targeting high frame rates, which is my concern. But hopefully, Capcom, if you're listening to this, 120 hertz output mode, like enable the proper the VRR low frame rate compensation. It exists. You can do it on PS5. You just got to do it yourself, versus the Xbox, where the system handles it instead.
Okay.
So I just think it's for a lot of users, the game's going to end up looking less fluid than it should. And I understand allowing the frame rate uncapped because it's good for future machines, like a PS5 Pro, for instance. But having the option to cap at 30, I think, makes a lot of sense in this case.
That's totally not why they do it, though. Like, no. they have unlocked frame rates all the time on machines that don't have forward compatibility necessarily in the like strictest sense of the word. Like like their PS4 version or Xbox One version of Resident Evil, whatever.
Like 4.
They're like awful.
It's just
no
all over
man's
the
land
place.
frame rates. And here, I actually would go a step further. I would say they need to drop the resolution of the game.
Yeah.
The preview footage showed like extremely basic combat dropping to like 25 FPS.
Not
and there's
acceptable.
probably huge monsters that you throw out tons of flames and stuff in this game, right? Like there's no way that's hitting 30. The game is probably targeting, based upon the engine presentations and their previous games, 2160p checkerboarding on the current gen machines. Non-dynamic, probably. Like that is obviously far too high res for what they're doing, so they should drop it lower to achieve at least a bottom level 30 FPS. I doubt it's CPU limited to below 30 FPS. That'd be extremely rare for this generation of consoles. I can't really think of many games that had that issue ever, other than stutters. And yeah, then you ensure a better experience for your PS5. Who knows what the Xbox Series X version is going to be like at the moment. But you at least give them a baseline better experience, and then just offer a high res mode for future consoles. Like they've done it before. Why not do it again? It feels very, I have no idea what the technical decision making was there, but I think it's just rooted in like false assumptions. And because I don't think anyone reacted positively to this news.
Nope.
Oh,
not particularly.
I hope they didn't like look at the original game and think, man, we should duplicate that experience. Because I don't know if you remember, but on PS3, this thing would drop to like, the original would drop to like 15 FPS or worse. Often the game was notorious for having a frame rate that was largely below 30 FPS pretty much all the time. It was very choppy. And yet people love the game. So like, yeah, we must make with German accent, of course.
They suddenly turned German.
We must make this accurate to the PS3 experience that everyone knows and loves.
I've just been reviewing the Dark Arisen version. It looks as though PS4 did get a frame rate cap to 30, but there are issues elsewhere, and there are frame drops, a lot of them on Switch by the look of it, which you'd expect, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't quite see the logic for that. I don't see the option. I don't see the issue of not having an option, which is just kind of weird. But there we are.
Have we seen a single Reach for the Moon game with an actual 30 FPS cap that works and is properly paced?
I can't even think of one, John. I really can't. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it exists. They may have capped some version of some game, like on Xbox One or something, to 30, and possibly with incorrect frame pacing. Somewhere in my memory, I'm remembering this, but I feel like by and large, these games that they release on this engine are uncapped.
Yeah, but
Okay.
for no good reason.
Yeah. I mean, Illusion's done patches for the PlayStation 4 version of Resident Evil 4 that gives a consistent 30 FPS cap. But it can be done, but that is just using a Sony system level library. Okay, I guess we just need to wait and see how this is all going to turn out. But it does look as though they're set on not having any graphics modes and uncapping the frame rate for whatever reason.
Yeah. One little shout out to our audience. I'm going to be covering Horizon Forbidden West on PC. This game releases day and date, I think, with that game.
Really?
Or maybe
Okay.
the day after. I can't recall. I think they're releasing very close to one another, so I won't have Dragon's Dogma 2 coverage on PC. I'm worried, though, like with all their other ports, that they do some bad things along with the good. They always have like a kind of really mixed port. Like it's generally good in a lot of ways, but then it like misses the mark completely in others. Here, though, for the first time ever, they're releasing DLSS. Like
Really?
with a big game. It's a DLSS game. Yeah, it is.
Wow.
That's
Wait, what?
awesome. Yeah,
Dude,
they're not using
a hushed
FSR.
awe.
Hushed awe, yeah, like, my gosh. So finally, like, because this engine has almost never had good image quality on PC without cranking up the resolution to ungodly levels. So, because FSR 2 didn't do it, neither did whatever they do or don't do for TAA. So we'll at least get DLSS, and I believe DLAA. I'm pretty sure FSR 2 is going to be there. I don't recall a frame gens there at launch. I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll take what we'll get.
That's a sad state, but yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, DLSS is a big, is a big thing.
Yeah, it is a big thing, but
for some reason, it just wasn't a thing up until now.
yeah, whatever that's about. Read into it if you will.
I think didn't Monster Hunter Rise have DLSS?
Yeah, and yeah, we've talked about that before. Monster Hunter World also had DLSS 1.0, which is very odd.
Okie doke.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. I think that's all we've got to say about that. Let's crack on and move on to the next news topic. Just a quick one. This one. Obviously, there was a new version of TimeSplitters in development, and it was canned, and we didn't really know anything about it until now with the release of 5 minutes of leaked footage. And John, it looks awfully familiar, doesn't it? And not entirely what we would expect from a TimeSplitters game, possibly.
Indeed.
But a lot what we would expect from Epic Games.
Indeed. This game was canned, and now it shall be caned, because this is basically Fortnite. And I'm a little bit sad to see that seems to have been what they were trying to make. Wow, yeah, it's... So TimeSplitters has always had this sort of cartoony aesthetic to its characters, I would say. And my first thought was, okay, that's cool. But it's first of all, they've made a third-person game. Well, they were making a third-person game. Seems to be heavily multiplayer focused, which is fair because that's a big part of that legacy. But everything about what they showed gameplay-wise looks pretty much just like one of the typical Battle Royale Fortnite-style games. Like, really, really looks like Fortnite.
Do you remember that third-person TimeSplitters game?
Nope.
John? I don't.
Nope. Do you remember Haze?
I do.
I do, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. This is not either of those things. I you know what? I'd rather play Haze than what this seems to be. This is really interesting though, because I'm surprised that they would take this approach, because people only remember the TimeSplitters name because of the type of game TimeSplitters was, and those types of games really don't exist widely any longer. So I feel like there's very little purpose in taking that IP and applying it to effectively just a Fortnite clone. That's not what people would want. And I think doing a somewhat stealth-based per mission shooter set across time, very much GoldenEye style, obviously, would have been a hit. I think people would love that. That's what we wanted, was that type of game, not a Me Too Fortnite game, which is, that seems like what it was looking like.
Totally.
I'm completely baffled by this. Like, I don't understand the direction that they were going. And now when I see that, it also kind of makes more sense why maybe it was canned. If this was like the direction they were heading in, like running this type of game, it takes a lot of resources. And if it's not a huge success, you're spending a lot of money for something that's ultimately going to fail. And which is why I also say entering into these big service games, the service game world is deadly. Because it takes a lot of money before you realize whether or not you've succeeded or failed. And if you failed, you've wasted tons. And there's really no going back. The game will just die. Man, they even have like the flying down with the parachute thing going on here. Jeez. This is just... What a shame. What a shame.
Was there nothing of redemption about it whatsoever?
I mean, the visuals aren't bad or anything. There was some interesting architecture in the footage. But... large.
So no.
Yeah, that's not a ringing endorsement of a shooter game.
As a fan of TimeSplitters 2 and Future Perfect, this is not a game I want to play. This is not a game I would have played.
Looking for.
Not what I would have.
I mean, obviously, it looks really, really early, but the concept is Fortnite.
It's so bad.
It's freaking Fortnite again, and so, you're not gonna outdo Fortnite. Not like this. No. Like. If you want to beat Fortnite, and you can't necessarily beat Fortnite, you can't do it by just copying Fortnite. Like we've seen Helldivers 2 taking off, right? That's a different thing. It's a different sort of game. It has something people want. It's not just Fortnite again. And I think that's the mistake, is like you can't just like come at this and say, yeah, I'm just going to copy this popular game and maybe we'll be popular too, because people are not that dumb. They're not just going to fall for that.
Yeah. So the question is, like, what do TimeSplitters fans have these days anymore that even scratches that itch? Mixing of, like single player campaign with semi-stealth based gameplay, multiple mission objectives going through time, and then a multiplayer mode with bots, which offers a surprising amount of replayability and fun. I mean, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, it's not really the game that's made these days, is it?
No, it isn't. It's kind of sad. I just looked up for this, by the way, because I was very curious. If you recall, there was TimeSplitters Rewind. Do you recall that? There was a CryEngine remake of TimeSplitters 2. It got actually pretty far. And then I'm looking online, and it seems like I haven't seen an update for almost a year or longer now. So
wasn't there also like a leak?
Very sad.
Like somebody got a PS3 dev kit that had like an unfinished like version of TimeSplitters on it.
Yeah, TimeSplitters 4 test level for graphical stuff that you can potentially spawn bots in. Yeah, I saw that.
So that was
that's wild. What a shame that the only version is the PS3 version that came out.
Closest thing I could say to this is that, and I don't know what the full game will be or when it'll hit, but there's this game called Agent 64 Spies Never Die that's basically like a GoldenEye style game, and it's the closest thing to TimeSplitters GoldenEye that I've seen being made. It goes for a bit of an N64 aesthetic, but it's silky smooth and it feels awesome to play. I do recommend checking that out, and I eagerly await the full game. But beyond that, there ain't too many games in this vein being made anymore, and that vein being dropping you into a mission with objectives. You explore that map. You're dealing with enemies in multiple creative ways. All of this stuff is fun and awesome, and I think people would dig it. And just nobody's making games like this anymore. Of course, the Perfect Dark game is still MIA. We have no idea what's going on there.
Oh God, we haven't seen that in ages.
That was announced like 6 years ago or something, 5 or 6 years ago.
Whenever the initiative started up,
right, and
whatever that was about.
So it's just, man, it's a shame.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Okay, I think that's all we've got to say about that. Let's move on to the next topic. Okay, final news story of the week. Interesting quote here from AMD's Marc Papermaster. Marc Papermaster.
It's a good name. Such a good name.
It's a great name. And it's a very specific quote, and it's this. 2024 for us is a huge year because we have spent so many years developing hardware and software capabilities for AI. We've just completed AI enabling our entire portfolio, so cloud edge PCs, our embedded devices, our gaming devices. We're enabling our gaming devices to upscale using AI, and 2024 is really a huge deployment year for us. So now the bedrock's there, the capabilities are there. Alex, what does he mean? Gaming devices is quite specific in that it's not really talking about GPUs in the desktop PC sense, I suspect.
Yeah.
But it's kind of curious that they're talking about spending a lot of development resources on AI, because in the consumer space, we've not really seen anything from AMD.
We haven't yet. And that's why it's I'm still not exactly sure what this is directly referencing. And so the ideal goal that I think a lot of people who follow AMD and follow PC GPUs and stuff is they want FSR to transition over to an AI model version, ML version, just like DLSS and XeSS has, that improves quality and gets rid of the issues that FSR2 has. That's what I think people want. But this could actually be referencing something else completely. It could be referencing like a dummy AI upscaler, as in a pure spatial process upscaler, just like NVIDIA Shield had back in the day, just like how do you like kind of like, you know, how the AI upscaling for videos works with NVIDIA. It could be referencing technology like that. And it not being very specific actually makes me a bit worried that it is that, and it's not actually FSR being driven by machine learning. The reason why I'm a little bit curious about like how they would deploy it if it were FSR in the first place would be that they would have to have some sort of cutoff about what AMD portfolio GPUs can actually support it. I'm not sure how willing they are to do that based on their stances in the past. There would also have to be some sort of middle ground deployment there that would have to exist that makes it cross-platform for the most part, because I'm thinking with GPU open that they would want to keep pushing that initiative because it's their way to make developers invest in their technology. Who knows? Maybe this also is a plug-in to DirectX SR, where they're going to offer through their driver a better version of FSR that may use machine learning for future hardware that's coming out, RDNA 4. But at the moment, based upon what I read in that sentiment and the way it's phrased, I would actually be surprised if it was referencing FSR being machine learning. That's my personal opinion, though. Obviously, other people can read this in any other way they want.
Well, I agree entirely with you, because I'm seeing headlines saying things like AMD teases next-gen FSR, upscaling tech with AI, when there's not actually any reference to FSR whatsoever in that particular quotation. And when they're talking about gaming devices, typically they're talking about consoles, right? Mm-hmm. So this could be a PlayStation 5 thing. It could be something they've been involved with. I mean, typically when it comes to stuff like reconstruction, Sony likes to do its own thing, build its own custom solutions using AMD hardware, of course.
Right.
So it's it's a very vague statement, and we just don't know what it means, except something is happening in 2024.
PS5 Pro, the PS5 Professional.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that the stuff that Sony did with PS4 Pro for checkerboarding never made it into the PC space at all, really. The ID buffer. Yeah. So, there's no guarantee that what's happening in the gaming devices will actually arrive on PC at all. But surely at some point AMD has got to talk more about AI on its RDNA stuff. Because so far we see nothing. In fact, actually, Alex, thinking about it, when we met Frank Azor at Gamescom, he was talking about how NVIDIA spends a lot of die area on stuff like tensor cores. And the implication there was that he didn't really think it was a great use of area.
That's pretty interesting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe they've got some other solution, but surely at some point there has to be that sort of coming together where AI is going to play such a key role in gaming going forward, not just from upscaling. Upscaling is just the beginning, right? AMD's already 4 years behind on that.
Yeah.
Since DLSS 2 came along and basically changed the landscape there.
Yeah, I really wish they'd get with the times there. I do think it's actually worth the die space being spent. The only thing, like, AMD has different considerations that I always forget about. Like, technically they have to worry about, like, deploying similar architectures, because, like, as much as they have to worry about deploying the architecture on platforms that have more constrained resources always. So they have to think a little bit more, like, and NVIDIA can just target desktop GPUs for the most part and laptops. And then, the AI sector on the side of that, which is now using completely different chips. So I think that they have, like, different considerations always, and that's driven their research. And I'm like worried a little bit that even RDNA 4 isn't going to be, like, the thing that we want as a result of this, because it took a lot of, like, it's going to take a lot of research time and development to get first the chip, to have the hardware, and then also have software to utilize it, which is a completely different field. Like, it took a while for NVIDIA to get FrameGen out. It took a while for them to get DLSS 2. It took a long while for them to get ray reconstruction. And I just feel like, what can they do to get their foot in the door here on the gaming side of things, given all the inertia that's already happened? I don't know, but I wouldn't read too much into the sentiment, just like Rich has not read too much into it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the bottom line. Gaming devices is quite specific, and it doesn't mean desktop GPUs. So, it could. We hope. When you look at what Intel's doing as well, I mean, they decided they could not come to market without some sort of machine learning component.
Just crazy.
And so the fact that we could be seeing a next generation AMD architecture that doesn't have it seems unlikely to me. They must have seen the direction of travel from 2018 onwards, especially in 2020, right? So, and obviously, they would have been closely associated with Microsoft and the DX12 steering group. So they would have known, from the DirectML conversations onwards, how important it was going to be. And obviously, it's taking on a whole new level now. There's also the FTC leak
Right.
from Microsoft about what their aspirations for the next generation Xbox, which is heavily ML based, or at least they're looking to leverage that for new gameplay opportunities. Anything to add to this, John? It is a bit too vague to really comment more about, but I'm interested in your thoughts.
I mean, it's too vague, like you say, but I mean, it could be a PS5 kind of system. It could be, I don't know, another handheld thing. I mean, who can say on that front, really? I was thinking like AMD has been big in the handheld PC gaming space, right?
Yeah,
They're in the Steam Deck, they're in the Ally, they're in a bunch of those machines. So I could see it behooving them to leverage things like AI to improve the effective visual quality on a handheld based system going forward. I assume that they'd be working probably with Valve again on the next evolution of the Steam Deck
yeah.
as well. So, I mean, those types of devices, it's most likely something like that, but I would imagine they will leverage whatever they're doing here in the PC space eventually.
Eventually.
It doesn't make sense to do it otherwise. If they launch a next gen GPU, like you say, without this kind of acceleration, these types of features, I don't know, man. That's not good.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens when time
I
passes.
mean, FSR3 has come along, and we haven't really seen too much evolution from the spatial upscaling side. FSR2 just seems to be, well, FSR3 contains FSR2, which doesn't seem to have evolved that much since we initially saw it, or the 2.2 variant.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the one where it's like pretty much that, more or less. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think there's too much more that we can add to that. I'm just
Nine.
looking at this question from Paul Calamata. Do you think AMD's ML upscaling tech will be present in the PS5 Pro as its standout feature? If so, could this also have a positive cost implication for delivering a Pro-like upgrade without a major price premium over the base model? I think, if it's got it, great. It would definitely help because, FSR2 has just kind of been used and abused on the current generation consoles to the point where it really doesn't look great. You do need a higher quality solution. I'm not really too worried about games that actually go down as low as 720p in a dynamic resolution sort of environment. Obviously, it's not ideal, right? But the issue is that the upscaling to take you back to 1440p or 2160p just isn't really good enough to sustain that. And I think it can be done. I think it could work in a sort of console-like living room environment. But the fact that the Pro have additional GPU resources on top of that would obviously, hopefully, mean we wouldn't have to. Anything more on this before we move on? No, I think we're all good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's move on to supporter Q&A. This is the part of the show where every week we petition our audience, our supporters, to come up with a big bunch of questions. We choose the best, or rather the ones we're best equipped to answer, and then we answer them. But do remember, we have our new show, DF Indirect, where, a bunch of great questions we didn't have time to answer or required some research to answer. They'll be appearing in that show. Let's take this question, first of all, from Leftist Hominid. For people looking to buy a handheld PC, but not necessarily in the here and now, what would you recommend? Buy the OLED Steam Deck now, or wait a few months for the next iteration of the ROG Ally, or something else? John, I'm going to put this one to you.
Oh, yeah. That's tight. Frankly, at this point, having fiddled with the ROG Ally and now owning the OLED Steam Deck, I don't think there's any purpose in buying a non-Steam Deck PC handheld. In its current form,
Straight in there.
Windows isn't good enough for it. It doesn't do it. The experience is bad. It feels like a weird bastardized laptop thing. That is fundamentally why I never liked the idea of these handheld PCs in the first place, because I just don't think the interface is good enough. The experience isn't good enough. Valve fixed all of that. Even if it's not that
agreed.
powerful, the Steam Deck, the experience of using the Steam Deck, the way SteamOS works, it's incredible. It's so optimized, so beautifully designed, and that you can just so seamlessly just drop out to the desktop if you need to do some back-end stuff or some custom stuff. It's there if you want it, and then you just inject that stuff right back into the SteamOS interface, and you're back to the main gaming mode, and it has all the conveniences of the console, of a console with the flexibility of PC. It's a brilliant device, and I would either just get the OLED Steam Deck or just hold out, I guess, long term for whatever they're doing next. But I am now firmly entrenched in the Steam Deck world at this point.
That sounds right.
That's quite a turnabout, though, John. I think we've discussed that before.
We have.
But the screen did it.
It was the screen. That was the big thing for me. Because the LCD screen on the original deck is just bad. I think it's not attractive to look at. I don't like using it. The OLED screen is beautiful on this thing, and it helped me appreciate everything else that the Steam Deck does. And that also comes down to just things like the way the frame rate caps work, the integer scaling options, like all these things just popped into the side menu, just instant. Like, it's so good that you're like, I want this in all PC games. We need this stuff in Windows. We need like it's insane how good this is. Like, it's exactly the type of features that you would want. And we've never really had anything like this in the PC space. So man, Valve just they killed it. The Steam OS experience is super good. It's awesome.
Okay, so you wouldn't wait for the ROG Ally to...
No, unless there would have to be a dramatic shift in how Windows works for this to be viable, or Valve would have to open up Steam OS in a way that you get proper updates and like. Because I think you can install Steam OS on one of these devices, I believe, but like the driver support's like kind of fiddly or something. Like, it doesn't.
There's a lot of reasons. I'll go into it shortly, but I'm curious about your viewpoint on this, Alex.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm of John's mind here, where I feel like the environment surrounding the Steam Deck makes it such a positive experience. You can't also forget the per game shader cache downloads. The curated controls and things like that. These are all aspects that are very nice that just kind of come from having the system. Also, putting games to sleep and re-upping.
That's huge.
Going back, huge. I think that is a feature that I've used on the Steam Deck quite a bit. I mean, it's not guaranteed to work in every game. I've had issues in games before, but it works so well that it's generally great.
It generally works.
It generally works. So I'd say that too. I also think, as someone who would use this device for not playing AAA games that are just coming out, I don't know what you want to play in the audience there, but I think if you're really cool with playing PS4 era games and earlier, then the Steam Deck will be completely fine. It just doesn't have the guaranteed longevity that something like a ROG Ally has due to the size, but also has things like battery life and, a really good screen. So I feel like it's just better.
Yeah. How do I begin this one? I play a lot of these handhelds, the Windows-based handhelds, and you can do stuff on them that the deck can't do. You can play Alan Wake 2 on something like a ROG Ally. It's a bit of a faff actually on the Ally because it's only got 16 gigs of total memory, but some of the other devices have 32, and it just runs, and you get 25 to 30 FPS. Upscale 1080p. For a handheld, it kind of works, all right. The issue with the Steam Deck is that you're getting much more than just a Windows PC in a handheld form factor. It basically solves all of the problems that you would have with a Windows PC in a handheld form factor, and that's why it's a better deal. It's that simple. You've just got a great integration with Steam. You've got amazing features on there. The OLED screen is state of the art in terms of handheld displays. The only thing that I'd really like to see would be VRR, which is not there, which is a bit of a shame. But the ROG Ally does have that. And that does mean that, if you're purely focused on performance, there is an argument to have the ROG Ally because it does things that the Steam Deck can't do. But on balance, the Steam Deck OLED in particular is doing so many things well that I just can't really recommend anything else at this time. I'm not sure that's going to change with the next iteration because I think that we've got the 8840U coming now, the Ryzen 7 8840U, which I believe is using much the same GPU as the existing one in the Z1 Extreme, which is in the ROG Ally. Could be more efficient. There could be marginal gains, but it's not going to be a game changer. And I'd be really surprised if it solves the big issue, which is battery life.
Right.
I think the biggest recommendation I have for the Steam Deck OLED is that it solves so many problems compared to the original Steam Deck. specifically the screen and battery life, that it's the handheld I take with me on holiday now. I mean, I'm not in the office at the moment, as you probably see, but the Steam Deck OLED is the machine that I would take with me, when previously, before that came along, it was the Switch OLED. But the Steam Deck OLED solves the battery life problem, it solves the screen problem, and it's got enough performance for the games that I'm interested in playing on the go. And it's not as if there's any shortage of games on that either, because you've got basically the entirety of the Steam legacy library, which the vast majority of it's working pretty well. So waiting for the next iteration of the ROG Ally, I guess we need to look at what the 8840U does, but I can't see it being a game changer. So right. I think I'd stick with the OLED for now.
Good point.
Let's move on to this next question. It's from Rich, not me. If cost were no issue and the PSVR 2 does actually get effective PC VR support, what VR headset would be best for PC gaming? Even excluding the particular headset exclusives, which display would play, say, Half-Life Alyx or Doom 3 BFG VR mod, except for best? PSVR 2, AVP, Quest 3, Quest Pro? I guess you're best positioned to answer this one, John.
Yeah, Quest 3. 100% full stop. It's
okay. That was quick.
It's still currently the best option, I think. It's a phenomenal headset still, and the wireless connection to PC is unreal. It's so good. I actually had Marc Triforce Duddleson try it. This is a man that does not like digital games. He doesn't like PC gaming. He doesn't trust wireless stuff. He hates streaming. Like all these, he's like me, but worse in that regard. Like
he's like me, but worse.
Genuinely thought he believed what I said, but was very skeptical. And when he tried Half-Life Alyx on that thing after coming from the PSVR 2, he said, this feels like a 2-generation leap over the PSVR experience. It was that intense. Good. Like the clarity, the performance, the fluidity, it's so good. I honestly cannot recommend anything more than that. I mean, okay. PSVR's fine, but it's the Quest 3 didn't exist when I tested the PSVR 2, and my opinion has changed. But man, it's just I think the Quest 3 is a phenomenal headset, and I think that's what other headsets should be competing for. The wire stuff, I'm done with wires for VR at this point. It just doesn't work for me anymore. And that extra clarity, the motion clarity and sharpness of the Quest, it's a perfect balance for that. Yeah.
Right. But Marc Triforce Duddleson, he's not into wireless. Has he got a Wi-Fi network?
He does, but
used begrudgingly.
Most devices are wired.
Amazing.
I'm imagining like a house where like there's just snaked lines of wires going across every room and the floor.
Oh, I know.
And everything.
He went into this. He tried PSVR 2 first. This is the one he preferred and the one he was interested in testing. And I think that's what he secretly wanted to buy. And then thought, yeah, this is good. This is fine. This is cool. I like RE4. And then I started him right at the beginning of Half-Life Alyx. He put on the headset and he was just like floored. Just like, oh my God. He could not believe what he was seeing.
Was it a combination of the game and the headset?
Yes,
or the headset?
It's the combination of the two.
Half-Life Alyx.
Right.
The level of clarity is so high, and just like the fluidity of everything, and the fact that it was wireless, and just when you combine the two, it was stunning. And I agree. Like every time I put on the headset with Half-Life Alyx, I'm still like, wow, this game is special.
Okay, fair enough. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
But we do really still want to see proper PC support for PSVR 2. But I do still think that we still haven't got to grips with how the logistics of that are actually going to work. But we discussed that the week before that. Let's move on to the next question. This one from Omar. Hi DF team! Exclamation point! Intrigued to hear your thoughts on this. How does DLSS at 1440p 27-inch compare to 4K 32-inch in your opinion? Assuming you have a high-end rig, 7800X3D 4080, would you prefer 4K DLSS performance modes to a 1440p DLSS quality mode with a high refresh rate experience? I'm aware that 4K DLSS performance mode is scaled up from 1080p internally versus 960p for DLSS quality at 1440p, but curious to hear your thoughts on the final output image. In your opinion, is 1440p DLSS quality mode good enough? Or does 4K performance mode blow it out of the water? Keep up the good work! Exclamation point. Cheers! Exclamation point. Alex, I'll let you know quickly what I think about this.
Please do. Yeah.
I just don't like 27-inch monitors anymore.
They're tiny.
They're just too small for me, but I can see, even if you're at 4K, you can still get you can still get 1440p screens with high refresh rates. So I guess the argument is about the respective quality levels and the respective performance levels. I think for me it would be on a game-by-game basis, but I'm generally okay with 1440p quality.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's great looking. So I guess the one thing is like the pixel density, 5-inch diagonal, it's bigger, sure, but like you're still 32-inch 4K. Its pixel density is really high.
Yeah.
Unless you're like right there. So I think in this case, it will look much more pristine, that 4K DLSS performance mode. Slight difference in internal resolution, but it's mainly this resolving to the 4K grid, and it does it really well. I've always thought performance mode 4K looks pretty great in DLSS. I always demo it in my videos because I think it looks good. It's really a matter of what are you looking for in a game? Like with a 4080, not super, right? This is a 4080, right? Super's not even that much difference anyways.
It's the same, basically.
It's the same thing. What am I talking about? The 4080, it is a great 4K GPU, and it's recommended. It's pretty much always the recommended GPU for a lot of games.
Yeah, pretty much.
In their 4K Ultra, etc. mode. But no, not even really.
It's just the path tracing that generally you see a marked
really
decrease
only path
on
tracing.
4080.
Yeah, you're right. I honestly think with a 4080, that is such a big GPU, and it's better than a 3090, which I've played 4K games at with for a long time before that. I honestly think 4K is a great choice for you. Just you'll have to realize then you're stuck with 4K for the future. So whatever your next GPU is, you're going to have to take into consideration again, I'm going to invest as much as possible to get a good 4K experience, unless I want to change monitors again or deal with upscaling, as in low res upscaling, that is 1440p already being DLSS'd, then doing it via the GPU scaling in your GPU up to 4K. So I would say, actually, yeah, do 4K if you have 4080.
We got there in the end.
I got there in the end, but I was at first I was annoyed with the question. I'm so sorry. I was like, I can't tell you that. That's I don't have these screens right in front of me. Then I thought about it a bit more. I'm like, actually,
then you thought about it. Okay.
I thought about it.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is what do you want from high refresh rate? Is it sort of super low latency? If you just want the fluidity of high refresh rate, DLSS 3 is getting really good these days.
Yeah,
and it should get you within that region on a 4080, especially if you're on optimized settings. Do you have any particular opinions on this, John?
I was just thinking about PPI, the pixels per inch kind of thing, actually. And what's interesting, because I'm testing a 27-inch monitor that I'm going to write up at some point soon. And 27-inch 1440p is 109 pixels per inch, which is about equivalent to a 42-inch 4K native screen.
wow.
Right. They basically have the same PPI. And I noticed this right away. I was like, wait a minute, these look like the same. Whereas 32 at 4K is 140 pixels per inch. So that monitor will be sharper and you get a larger size. Thus, I kind of feel like I got to go with the 4K, even beyond the screen size differences. It's just, but that's why I have to say 42-inch OLED is the best.
Very good looking at those PPIs there, John.
It is the best monitor size, I think. 42-inch rules for a desktop. If you got a big desk, like it seems big at first, but it's just it's a good immersive experience, and you can just run everything at 100% scaling, and it feels right.
Okay, next question from Daniel Schaefer. Hey guys, do you think Sony has been surprised with the sales of the PlayStation Portal? And with handhelds being the new trend, Nintendo really is a trendsetter. Do you think Sony would consider pursuing the same handheld strategy you're hoping Microsoft will follow? That seems like it'd be really difficult to have parity between a handheld and a full-blown console. With return on investment being ever more difficult for the industry with the PSP rebirth. trademark pending, be a bespoke console with its own games, or would it just have a library of PS4 and certain PS5, PS6 games? Thanks! Exclamation point. John, first of all, do you think Sony has been surprised with the sales of the PlayStation Portal? I guess the fact that it seems to have sold out everywhere would suggest they didn't make enough. Ergo, yes.
Considering the lack of stock and the fact that it's not very good, it is interesting to see how well it's selling. But
Indeed.
I'm actually unsure about the I think if Sony were to pursue a new handheld system, they would have to take a solution similar to what we've been discussing, where it would have to natively play games available for another machine. I don't think Sony nor Nintendo want to go back to the split model of having to support two bespoke platforms. It's just too expensive. And you're dividing up your resources. They've already kind of done that with PSVR 2, and you see how that's going, unfortunately. So if they were ever to enter the dedicated handheld space again, and I don't know if they will, maybe sometime, I suspect it would be more like what we've been talking about, where, Thing
is, if Microsoft is going to do it, then the work needed to scale games across handhelds to high-end PC would be done, and therefore it would possibly make sense for there to be a PlayStation handheld. At the same time, one might argue that, they're doing a pretty good job with Steam Deck support on the PC ports. So maybe it's just a diversification that would be like one step too far. I don't know.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't know. I'm curious.
They've got some great results from their previous handhelds, though, but that did require dedicated ports, didn't it?
Yes.
So, tricky one. I guess we just don't know. I don't think they could actually just run PS4 games on it unless there was actually a design imperative to do that, which would be quite challenging to pull off. But I understand there were some rumours going around recently that said it would have 18 compute units, just like PS4, precisely for that reason. As to whether they're doing it or not, I don't know. I do think there probably has been some exploratory work done on the handheld space with PS4, simply because, AMD are doing it, right? They've done it, and it makes sense to sort of have a look at the work that AMD has done, since they're a close partner of Sony. What do you think about this, Alex?
I think if Microsoft were to do it, Sony, it's hard to say, would Sony let Microsoft have that market or something like that? Would they want to compete there for fear of being left behind? Then I would say yes, and they would come out with something if Microsoft did it first, or the other way around. So
the issue with this sort of following in the footsteps of another platform holder is the fact that it takes so long to develop a piece of hardware, and you can't really do that without it being years late.
Yes.
So
you got your Kinects after your Wii's came out, and that was kind of successful. I don't know.
I think that's actually one of the biggest surprises people that I still have from the audience, is that they think they can react to Microsoft could react to Sony immediately. They could deploy a piece of hardware within months. That's not the way it works. It takes millions of dollars of R&D just to make a silicon chip.
Yeah. Or at best they can revenant some old project that got canned, really.
Yeah, or they can adapt an existing technology, right?
That is but that's rare. That's probably pretty rare.
Release a new PSP with a UMD drive and an OLED screen.
Sick. Give it to me now.
Just let you play all your old PSP games.
I don't know how many UMD videos came out. But yeah, I would like it if it happened. I think it'd be cool, but at this point in time, I think they have other priorities. I don't know. They're probably pretty worried about the current situation with regards to AAA, and
I think if they're doing it, they're doing it now, and they wouldn't be at all cognizant of what Microsoft are doing or care even. There's one thing that I've learned from several meetings with Marc Sony. You raise Microsoft, he just doesn't care. He's razor focused on his own thing. And if you think about the development timeline for any given piece of hardware, it kind of makes sense, right? There's nothing he can do about what Microsoft are doing. You just got to focus on doing the best possible job that you're doing. So yeah, I guess that's it. Let's move on to our final question, which is actually 3 different questions. We actually had a huge bunch of sort of John-related questions this week.
Okay, that's weird.
So let's try and do this in a quick-fire round. This one from Sergio Anez. What are John's thoughts on the fact that when you Google him, it labels him as a television producer? Cheers, gents! Exclamation point. How do you like that, John? Television producer.
I don't know why that's there. That doesn't make sense.
You're on IMDb, I believe, as a television producer.
That's true.
This is true.
Is YouTube a television channel? Not really.
It's like a modern television channel. It's better than television.
It's probably better than television.
Okay. So you're completely ambivalent to being labeled a television. Okay, don't care. Don't care one way or the other.
Don't understand.
Well, let's see what you think about this one then. This one from Mr. Bespoke. Hi guys, question for John. Did you and Marc, that's Marc Twyford Duddleson by the way, get up to any shenanigans such as retro hunting, etc., whilst he was over in Germany? And did he get recognised when showing him around your hometown? Thanks and keep up the good work. I've actually only been recognised once in my own hometown, so the concept of, well, actually maybe I would be recognised in John's hometown. Who knows? John, answers please.
We did get up to shenanigans. We went to a retro Börse in Heidelberg. Which is like, it's a big fair where people sell unused games, and we had a lot of fun there. Marc bought a lot of Master System games, which I know Richard just loves.
Well, only the Master of Evil, as you know.
Exactly.
I've been thinking a lot about the Master System, and I've realised that, I saw when my sort of negative reaction to the Master System came from one, seeing AM2 games like Outrun poorly ported. Secondly, the 3D glasses, which were just abysmal. And thirdly, and perhaps most crucially, John, they would have been 50 hertz games.
Ooh, yeah.
So maybe I've been doing dirty on the Master System, but I still think I wouldn't want to touch it again. Still, good for Marc.
Yeah, it was fun. We got recognized several times in different places. A couple times at the Retro Börse. And then we went to Munich the following week, I guess, and visited a couple game shops there. One was bad, one was awesome. It was like Funtainment or something it was called. And we went in, it was like a comic book shop initially. We're like, and then we like pretty much like immediately turned and left. And the guy's like, hold up. If you go around the side here into the back courtyard, there's a big old store full of games. And sure enough, there was a lot of games back there. It was a really awesome store actually, and we got recognized there, which was very nice. So we chatted with a fellow that recognized, and that was fun. And bought some stuff. I got the Flintstones Super Famicom game there, and it's actually awesome. We finished the game while he was here.
Okay.
It's very.
He's gone home now, hasn't he?
Yeah,
he's not in the background doing anything.
He's back in America. We also went to Kuschel Muschel, which is a special German retro game shop here in the area, and a few other places like that. So, Marc did a lot of game shopping. That's for sure.
So, to answer Mr. Bespoke's question, you've ticked off shenanigans. Were there any hijinks or malarkey?
Not too much of either, I would say.
But there was funtainment.
There was funtainment. We did go to a German style. We went to a very German style, like restaurant, beer house kind of place with the long tables everywhere. And he got a big old ham shank on a bone with sauerkraut, which was like extremely German.
Okay. How did he take it?
He loved it.
Wow.
Can't you? Yeah. Can you not love that? Yeah.
Exactly.
We got a final question here from Minion John. This question's for the raw and uncut John Bearderman. Uncut. It's not the context. No, I'm not going there.
No,
anyway, what's the longest you've gone without shaving your beard? Also, any chance we could see any other TF crew member growing a beard in the future?
I think Rich would look great with one of his long like beards.
The keyboard wizard beard.
Like the grandmaster, the true grandmaster.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll tackle my beard shortly, but yeah, I must admit, your new beard, John, it's kind of mirror universe style stuff happening there.
No,
is it staying? Is it going?
It'll probably stay for now. I tried to trim it to limited success.
Good job.
So I don't want a big old bushy beard really, but
okay. What is the longest you've gone without shaving your beard to answer Minion's question?
Probably this.
Okay.
I've not done that too often.
Well, yeah, what could I say? Was it Harrison Ford in The Fugitive had some sort of really gross old man beard?
Love it.
That would be what you get if I let mine run unchecked. So it's not going to happen. Unless I wanted to sort of, blend in with the local vagrant community. It's just it's not going to happen. Alex, any beard
dreams?
You've been talking about this.
Dreams.
Any beard-like aspirations?
Longest I've ever gone without shaving is probably a month.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't like the way it looks on my face. I start looking like some French count immediately. I don't get a lot of hair in the middle right here of my mustache, so it immediately goes like this.
That's awesome.
I mean, it looks fine, but no, I don't like that look. And I think my face looks much better clean shaven.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, that's it. That's the end of the Inquisition. The end of the supporter questions for this particular episode of DF Direct Weekly. So please do like, subscribe, share. On the off chance you did find any of that valuable beard-like information of interest. DF Supporter Program. Join us for early access opportunities. Early access to DF Direct Weekly. The opportunity to ask us about our beards in our weekly call for questions. And a whole bunch of other stuff happening there. Exclusive shows, etc., etc., etc. But that's all from us for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.